Juno Park has read Campus Hearts front to back twice. She knows every toxic red flag Damien Choi waves, every manipulative smirk Ethan Lowe deploys, and exactly how the bland, sweet original heroine stumbles her way into heartbreak before choosing the wrong man anyway. What she doesn't know is why the universe decided to shove her soul into the body of a completely forgettable side character with 2 lines of dialogue, and a single scene where she trips over a cafeteria tray. Her plan is simple. Avoid the plot, avoid the male leads, pass her exams, and graduate in one emotionally unscathed piece. The plan lasts exactly 48 hours. Right up until the housing office smiles at her with catastrophic cheerfulness, and hands her a room key to share with Isolde Ashford. Welcome to Flustered novel, where love is chaotic, confessions are awkward, and every story comes with butterflies, drama, and a little emotional damage. Grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's romance story. Here is something they never tell you about transmigrating into a novel. It happens in the middle of a Tuesday. Not during a dramatic storm. Not in a flash of golden light with a booming celestial voice explaining the rules. I was eating instant ramen at 2 a.m., deeply invested in the final chapters of a college romance web novel called Campus Hearts, when the ceiling fan above my desk made one suspicious wobble. And then I woke up face down on a twin bed that smelled like fabric softener and regret. My name, in this new life, is Juno Park. In Campus Hearts, Juno Park appears in Chapter 4 to hand the heroine a campus map, says the words, "The library's on the left," and is never mentioned again. That is the full extent of my narrative significance. I am less important than the cafeteria's Tuesday pasta special, which at least gets described twice. I spent the first 20 minutes of my transmigration sitting on the edge of the bed cataloging everything I knew about this world. The original Juno, bless her uncomplicated soul, was a first-year student at Harwick University, a prestigious private school somewhere perpetually experiencing beautiful autumn weather. She had no friends of note, no family drama, no secret talents. She was background texture. Narrative wallpaper. For my purposes, this was perfect. Because I knew exactly what happened in Campus Hearts, and it was a disaster. Damien Choi, the male lead, classically handsome, chronically emotionally unavailable, the kind of man who apologizes by buying expensive coffee and considers that sufficient. Red flag. Enormous. The size of a parade float. Ethan Lowe, the second male lead, charming, witty, secretly territorial, and fond of the phrase, "I'm just being honest before saying something genuinely horrible." Also a red flag. More of a red flag collection, really. The original heroine, Lily Seo, would spend 300 chapters bouncing between them like a pinball before the author apparently grew tired and wrote a happy ending that satisfied absolutely no one. I had no intention of going anywhere near that plot. I would be the world's most studious background character. I would attend my classes, submit my essays, eat my meals with quiet dignity, and graduate with zero emotional damage. I had a plan. The plan was going beautifully for exactly 2 days. Then the housing office called me into their little administrative office with its little potted succulent and its little smile, and told me that due to a clerical restructuring of room assignments, which I am fairly certain is bureaucratic language for we lost the spreadsheet, I would be relocated. "Your new roommate," the administrator said, sliding a card across the desk with the energy of someone handing me a live grenade, "is Isolde Ashford." I stared at the name. The name stared back. Isolde Ashford. Second female lead. 3 scenes. 6 lines of dialogue. The character the fandom had written approximately 40,000 words of fanfiction about despite her having less page time than the campus fountain. In the novel, Isolde was described exactly once, in a single sentence. She was the kind of beautiful that made people forget what they were about to say. I had thought that was a figure of speech. Reader, it was not a figure of speech. Because when I arrived at room 214 of Harwick's East Dormitory, dragging my suitcase and my rapidly collapsing life plan, the door swung open, and standing in the doorway was Isolde Ashford, in a cream-colored cardigan, with her dark hair loose around her shoulders and an expression of mild assessment on her face, and my mind went completely, humiliatingly blank. "You're the new roommate," she said. Not a question. "The library's on the left," I said. She blinked. I wanted to be absorbed directly into the floor. "Right," said Isolde Ashford, and stepped aside to let me in. And that was how the worst, best, most catastrophically unscripted chapter of my entirely accidental life began. The room was divided. Not officially. There was no masking tape line down the middle, no written treaty, no flag planted in neutral carpet territory. But within approximately 4 minutes of my arrival, I understood that Isolde Ashford's side of the room operated on a different atmospheric frequency than the rest of the known world. Her desk was immaculate. Not clean. I have a clean desk, in the sense that things are pushed to the side with intent. Isolde's desk was immaculate. Pens in a ceramic holder, arranged by color gradient. A single succulent in a small white pot. Textbooks stacked in descending height order like they were posing for a photograph. A reading lamp positioned at an exact angle that I was almost certain she had calculated. My side of the room looked like a suitcase had exploded, and was now in the process of being eulogized. You can use the left 2 shelves, Isolde said. Without looking up from the textbook, she'd apparently returned to the moment I stopped being interesting. The bathroom schedule is on the door. I shower at 7. Don't use my conditioner. I wasn't going to. The last girl used my conditioner. I have my own conditioner. She glanced up at me. For approximately 2 seconds. Then back to her book. Good. I stood there holding a tote bag full of notebooks and a slowly growing suspicion that I was going to have an extremely interesting semester. Here is the thing about Isolde Ashford that the novel had failed to adequately convey. She was not cold exactly. Cold implies an absence of temperature. Isolde was more like very still water. Deep and calm, and giving absolutely nothing away, and capable of being startling when you looked directly into it. Also, she was studying architecture. I discovered this by accidentally knocking over her meticulously organized stack of papers, and watching her rescue them with the controlled urgency of someone defusing a small bomb. Sauve, it's fine. She was already reordering them. Her hands were quick and precise. She didn't look at me with irritation, which was somehow worse. She just handled it, efficiently and without drama, which made me feel more guilty than any glare would have. I'm Juno, I offered, when the papers had been restored to their rightful hierarchy. Juno Park. I know you probably already know that from the paperwork. Isolde, she said. I know. I mean, I know your name. Not in a weird way. You're just, around. I made a vague gesture that was meant to convey campus presence, and instead conveyed I am having a mild crisis. Isolde looked at the gesture, then at me. Around, she repeated. You're very recognizable, I said. People notice you. I know, she said, and went back to her book. There was no arrogance in it. Just fact delivered flatly, the way someone might say water is wet or the library is on the left. Which, by the way, I was never going to emotionally recover from saying. I unpacked my things. Isolde read. Outside our window, Harwick's autumn trees did their picturesque thing, completely indifferent to my suffering. At around 9 o'clock, she set down her book, aligned it with the edge of her desk, and said without preamble, Do you have preferences? I looked up from attempting to make my shelf look less like a yard sale. Preferences. Noise. Light. Temperature. People coming in and out. She looked at me with the neutral patience of someone who asked these questions once and only once. It's easier to establish parameters early. In the novel, in all 3 of her scenes, Isolde Ashford had never asked anyone a single question about their comfort. She had delivered observations, and looked beautiful, and left rooms at dramatically convenient moments. Quiet is good. I managed. I don't have people over. I like it a bit cool. And I'm a morning person, so I won't be keeping lights on late. Something in her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, and almost warmly. Good, she said. And then, the light on my desk won't bother you. The angle is set for minimal peripheral spread. Of course it was. Thank you, I said. She nodded and picked up her book again. I sat on my bed and stared at my ceiling and thought, this is going to be a problem. Not because she was terrible. Not because she was rude. Because she wasn't at all, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with that. By the end of week 1, I had learned the following things about Isolde Ashford. 1. She made her bed every morning with the precision of someone who had once been recruited by a boutique hotel. 2. She drank her coffee black at exactly 7:45, and held the mug with both hands while reading whatever she was reading, and the quiet domesticity of this image was frankly a threat to my mental health. 3. She did not tolerate mess in the shared spaces, but she expressed this not through complaint, because complaining implied emotional investment, but through tidying things away with pointed serenity. I left a jacket on the back of the desk chair we shared for common use. I came back and it was folded on my bed. No note. No comment. Just the jacket, folded with geometrical accuracy, delivering its own message. 4. She was taking 4 courses this semester, 2 of which were apparently brutally difficult, and she handled the workload with the unbothered competence of someone who had made a private deal with academic excellence. 5. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, someone knocked on our door, and Isolde said not tonight, through the wood without opening it, and they left. Who keeps doing that? I asked after the 3rd Thursday. Isolde looked up from her drafting table. She'd acquired a small drafting table, which she had asked me about before installing it, which remained bizarrely considerate, and said, various people. Do they want something? They usually want to study together. A pause. Or claim they do. I squinted. And you just say no every time? I study better alone. She returned to her architectural drawing. Her pencil made small, precise lines. Why? No reason. It's just, that's a lot of people. I thought of the campus-wide, low-key devotion Isolde inspired. People who went slightly pink when she walked past. Study groups who somehow ended up picking the library table nearest to wherever she sat. You have a lot of admirers. That doesn't bother you? She considered this with the seriousness she applied to everything. Not particularly. It would bother me more if they came in. I burst out laughing. It surprised both of us. I clapped a hand over my mouth immediately, because Isolde Ashford did not seem like someone who expected to cause laughter. But she was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not offended, not confused. Something more like curious. Sorry, I said, still smiling. That was just very honest. Most things I say are, she replied. And then, after a moment, almost like she was testing the shape of it. You didn't knock on a Tuesday or Thursday. I live here, I said. I don't knock on the door to my own room. No, she said. You don't. And she went back to her drawing, but there was something different in the set of her shoulders. Looser, maybe by 1 or 2 very small degrees. I turned back to my essay and tried very hard not to feel like I'd passed some sort of evaluation. The rules of our shared life became clear gradually, the way a picture develops. I did not touch her things. She did not rearrange mine past the shared spaces. I kept my noise-canceling headphones on when I listened to music. She warned me before she needed focused silence for a deadline. We traded the bathroom with a schedule so mutually respected it was honestly the most functional relationship I'd had in either of my lives. The problem was that somewhere between the schedule and the quiet coffees and the way she said good morning exactly once per day, one time, at the right moment, like she'd calculated the appropriate social expenditure, I had stopped experiencing Isolde as a character in a novel I already knew the ending of. I had started experiencing her as a person. And that was going to ruin everything. It started because of a sandwich. I had left my lunch in the dormitory fridge, which meant I was standing in the middle of the campus courtyard at noon with no food, no cash, and the particular desolation of someone who has made a series of small bad decisions that have accumulated into one humiliating outcome. You forgot to eat, said a voice beside me. I turned. Isolde Ashford was standing there in her coat, a paper bag from the campus cafe dangling from one hand, looking at me the way one looks at a mildly interesting architectural problem. I forgot my lunch, I corrected. Same result. She held out the paper bag. I stared at it. That's yours. I bought 2 things. She did not elaborate on why. Take the bun. I don't want it. She clearly did not want me to argue about it. I took the bun. It was warm and stuffed with cheese and somehow exactly what I needed, which was deeply suspicious. Thank you, I said. She nodded and began walking. I fell into step beside her, because our next class was in the same building and also because I was eating her bun, and it felt rude to immediately peel off in a different direction. We walked in silence for about 30 seconds, which with Isolde felt less like absence of conversation, and more like a mutual decision to simply exist in the same space. Are you going to the Alderton lecture tonight? I asked because I'd seen the flyer on her desk. Yes. Me too. She looked at me sideways. Just briefly. We can go together. Sure, I said, with the energy of someone who did not care at all, and then spent the rest of the afternoon caring enormously. The lecture was on urban spatial theory. I had come because it was relevant to one of my modules, and also because I was trying to expand my social circle beyond the narrow band of avoiding the plot. Isolde had presumably come because she was actually interested in urban spatial theory, which tracked. We sat side by side in the 3rd row, Isolde's preferred position, apparently. Close enough to see the slides clearly, far enough from the front to not be called on. She had a notebook open from the moment she sat down. I had my phone out to take notes and she did not visibly judge this, which I appreciated. During the Q&A, Someone asked a question that was technically quite sophisticated, but framed in a way that suggested the asker wanted to be noticed more than they wanted an answer. I watched Isolde's expression perform an almost invisible assessment, and returned to neutral. He phrased that to impress the lecturer, she murmured, not looking at me. I know, I murmured back. She glanced at me. One of those brief, recalibrating glances. What gave it away? He said arguably 4 times in one sentence. People who actually think something is arguable don't say the word that often. Isolde looked at me for a moment longer than usual. Then back at the front. Then a quiet sound that might have been the very beginning of a laugh, cut off before it fully formed. Afterwards, we got tea from a cart near the lecture hall because it was cold and the cart was there. We stood under the campus elms with paper cups and talked. Actually talked, not just cohabited, about the lecture, about the design of Harwick's older buildings, about which campus spaces she found well conceived, and which ones she found offensive on architectural grounds, which turned out to be quite specific and very funny. The new science annex, she said. What about it? It has a window that faces directly into another window. Same building. You can see straight into the room across the corridor. Whoever approved that design, she stopped. Pressed her lips together. Was committing a crime? I was going to say lacked basic spatial awareness, she said. But yes. Essentially. We walked back to the dormitory in the blue early evening, and when we reached our room, she sat at her desk and I sat at mine. And it was exactly the same as every other night except that something was different, and I couldn't locate it precisely enough to worry about it responsibly. My phone buzzed. My course group chat. Did I just see Juno Park walking back from the Alderton lecture with Isolde Ashford? That's not a date, right? It's probably not a date. I put my phone face down. It wasn't a date. I was 90% sure it wasn't a date. I went to sleep thinking about the way she'd said arguably with the faintest almost smile, and spent most of the night aggressively not examining why. Here is what I knew about the social architecture of campus hearts as it pertained to Isolde Ashford. She was respected. She was admired. She was the subject of approximately half the campus's collective romantic ideation. And she did not, the novel made clear, have any close friends. In Chapter 7 of Campus Hearts, a side character had described her as so out of reach she practically has her own atmosphere. I had read that and thought, dramatic but fair. I had not read it and thought, but what if someone got close enough to notice she laughs at things more than she lets on, and saves her extremely dry observations for very specific moments, and organizes her bookshelf by subject, but breaks the system for books she actually likes which she puts on the second shelf regardless of topic. To be clear, I had noticed that. To be clearer, I had noticed it and catalogued it in the part of my brain that was supposed to be focused on essays and plot avoidance, and this was a serious operational failure. The other characters were noticing, too. You're like, said my course mate Petra, squinting at me over her latte with what I can only describe as forensic intensity. Actually friends with her. We're roommates, I said. Juno. She came to your table in the cafeteria. She was going to sit nearby anyway. She came to your table. I have been in the same seminar as Isolde Ashford for 2 months. She has never once voluntarily sat down anywhere near me. I think about it. I sipped my drink. We just have a functional living arrangement. She brought you the thing, said Petra. I blinked. What thing? Last week, when you stayed in the library until it was basically closing and came back soaked from the rain. She had already brought your umbrella. I opened my mouth. Closed it. She said she was going past the library anyway. Petra stared at me. She probably was going past the library. Juno. Petra. She brought you your umbrella. I put my latte down. We are roommates, I said with great dignity. We look out for each other in basic ways because it is a small shared living space and cooperation is mutually beneficial. Petra looked at me the way people look at someone who is loudly insisting the sky is green. Sure, she said. Okay. The frustrating thing, was that I hadn't asked Isolde to look out for me. It had just started happening. I'd mention, offhand, that I had an early seminar and she'd set 2 alarms instead of 1, so that if I slept through the first she could knock. I'd leave a note that I was skipping dinner to finish a paper, and there'd be a granola bar on my desk when I came back, placed there without comment. She never made it into something. She never asked for acknowledgement or gratitude. She just did things with the calm efficiency of someone who had observed a deficiency and resolved it, and moved on. What are you doing? I finally asked her on a Saturday, when I discovered she had quietly gone and printed my lecture slides when the library printer ate my card. She looked up from her drafting table. Correcting a problem. You don't have to do things for me. She considered me. I know, she said. Then why? Because you do it for me, she said simply, and went back to her work. I stood very still in the middle of our room. She was right, I realized. Not because I felt obligated, but because somewhere over the past weeks, it had become completely natural to want to make her life slightly easier. To buy an extra coffee when I went out because I knew her schedule. To turn my lamp toward the wall when she was sleeping. To just care, in small domestic ways, because the thought of her having a less good day was annoying to me. Oh no, said my brain. Don't, I told my brain. My brain declined to engage with this instruction. The study session incident, and yes, it deserves capitalization, because it became the subject of dormitory legend for at least 3 weeks, began innocuously enough. Finals prep had descended on Harwick like a fog. The library was full. The cafe was full. The weird little courtyard alcove that nobody usually used was full. Stressed students had colonized every horizontal surface on campus, and were vibrating faintly with caffeine and desperation. I had come back to our room because the library noise had reached the specific frequency that makes it impossible to actually read anything, and found Isolde at her desk in a state I had never seen her in before. She had a pencil behind each ear. One eraser had rolled off the desk and onto the floor unnoticed. Her second coffee of the morning was on her left side instead of her right, which was wrong by her own internally consistent desk geography. She had 4 different reference books open simultaneously, and was moving between them with the controlled intensity of someone who was fine, completely fine, absolutely fine. Isolde, I said. How long have you been sitting there? Since 7. It was 1 in the afternoon. Have you eaten? A pause. The pencil behind her right ear was located by feel, checked, returned. I'll eat later. I set my bag down, opened my desk drawer, removed the emergency snack provisions I had, without really thinking about it, started keeping in there about 2 weeks ago, put a packet of crackers and some cheese portions on the corner of her desk. She looked at them, then at me. Structural engineering integration is due Thursday, she said, by way of explanation. Eat the crackers, I said. She ate the crackers. She did not look away from her books, but her shoulders dropped approximately half a centimeter. We studied in parallel for a while, she on her integrated systems, me on my historiography paper, with the easy quiet that had become our natural setting. At some point I made tea. At some point she got up to refill her water, and brought mine back too without asking. Can I ask you something? I said. You're going to regardless, she said, which was absolutely true. Did you choose architecture because of the problem solving? Or more the design part? She looked up properly this time. Why? Curiosity. You talk about spaces like they're arguments that are either valid or fallacious. I'm trying to figure out which part you love. She set her pencil down, looked at me with an expression I'd started to think of as the calculating one, where she was working out something more complex than the question. Both, she said finally. A building is a proof. Every element is a premise. It either holds together or it doesn't. A pause. You study history. Literature and history, yeah. Why? Because I find stories more honest than people, I said. People edit themselves. Stories don't. Someone wrote it down because they couldn't not. She was quiet for a moment. That's a good answer, she said. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised, she said. I'm revising my estimate. I squinted. Upward or downward? She picked up her pencil, went back to her work, but the corner of her mouth had done the thing it sometimes did. The very faint thing, which I had learned to watch for in the same way you watch for a particularly shy bird. Upward, she said. I was fine. I was completely fine. I turned back to my paper and was absolutely fine for the next hour and a half, except in every way that mattered. It was Petra again who told me about the legend. Apparently someone had walked past our door around 4 o'clock, heard complete silence, peeked through the gap, and witnessed Juno Park asleep at her desk with her head on her crossed arms, and Isolde Ashford, without breaking her concentration, getting up and putting a cardigan over her shoulders, and sitting back down. The someone had texted about it. The text had circulated. By Monday, 3 separate people had asked me if Isolde Ashford was my girlfriend. No, I said firmly to all 3 of them. Why does she put a cardigan on you when you fall asleep? Asked the third one. Because she's a considerate roommate, I said. Is that what we're calling it? Said the third one. Goodbye, I said. Here is the full unabridged list of ways I was not in love with Isolde Ashford. I was not in love with the way she said my name, Juno, with all 4 letters given their due, like it was a complete sentence. I was not in love with the fact that she had started saving me the good spot by the window in the cafe when she got there first, without telling me she was doing it, and without making it into anything. I was not in love with how she'd say something quietly devastating about a person or a situation, and then look at me to see if I'd caught it. And when I had, something in her went still and warm, like a satisfaction she didn't have language for. I was not in love with her. She was a character in a novel I'd read. She had been written to have 6 lines and a beautiful exit. I was a nobody side character who was supposed to give someone directions and disappear. We were not supposed to be anything. I was giving myself this excellent and rational lecture at approximately 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night when the door opened, and Isolde came back from her studio session with pencil marks on her wrist, her coat slightly damp from rain, and the look of someone who had won a difficult battle at some expense. She stopped when she saw me. "You're still up." "Essay," I said, gesturing at my laptop. She shrugged off her coat. I watched her, not trying to, just she moved with so much economy, no gesture wasted, everything purposeful. And then she turned and caught me watching, and I did what any self-respecting person would do in that situation. I knocked my entire cup of water off the desk. "Oh no, I've got it." She was already there, faster than she needed to be, and we both reached for the cup at the same time. And there was a moment where we were very close together on the floor of our room, and I could see the pencil marks on her wrist and the rain still caught in her hair, and she looked at me, and I had absolutely no idea what was on my face, but whatever it was made her go very still. "Juno," she said. "I'm fine," I said. "The water went. It mostly went sideways. It's fine, I'll get the..." "Juno." I looked up. She was looking at me the way she'd never looked at anyone in the novel, with something open in it, something that her face didn't usually allow, like she was asking a question she hadn't said out loud. My brain, which had been insisting for 6 weeks that everything was under control, quietly put on a hat and walked out. "Don't," I said, which was unhelpful and also not a real response to anything she had done. She blinked. "Don't what?" "Don't look at me like, you know. Like..." I made a gesture that was meant to communicate like that, and was frankly not my best moment. A long pause. "Like what?" she said again, and her voice had gone very careful, like she was handling something she didn't want to damage. "Isolde," I said. "Juno," she said back, with a patience that was somehow worse than any impatience would have been. I stood up. She stood up. We were not far apart, and our room was small. And I was making the exact face I make when I've read ahead in a book and I'm dreading the chapter I'm about to get to. Except this time I didn't know the ending. And that was terrifying and somehow the most alive I'd felt since I woke up in this world. "I'm going to go get paper towels," I said. "Okay," she said. I went and got paper towels. We cleaned up the water. We went to bed. Nothing happened. But something had, anyway. Harwick's Winter Festival was a big deal. Food stalls, student performances, a lantern walk around the lake. In Campus Hearts, it was the setting of a key romantic moment between the heroine and Damien, which I was going to be avoiding entirely. I was going with Petra, who had strong opinions about the food stalls and had created a ranked itinerary. I was not going with Isolde Ashford. Isolde Ashford had mentioned, neutrally, that she might go. At some point. She had a design critique the day after, and was uncertain about the timing. Everything was fine. We ended up going together because Petra was 20 minutes late, and Isolde came out of the dormitory at the same time I was standing in the cold deciding whether to go ahead, and she looked at me standing there and said, "I have 40 minutes, and started walking, and I followed her, and that was that. The festival was warm and loud and golden. Lanterns strung between the bare trees. Everything smelling like mulled cider and roasted something. Isolde moved through crowds with a quality I could only describe as parting. People seemed to register her presence and shift, not rudely, just instinctively, like water around something still and certain. We ate. We walked. She had strong opinions about the structural integrity of the food stall construction, that one would fail in any sustained wind, and admired the lanterns in a specific architectural way, about negative space and how warm light changed the perception of volume. "You look at everything like you might have to explain it later," I said. "Habit," she said. "You read everything like you're looking for the author." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "You look at people. At situations." She glanced at me briefly. "Like you're looking for the intention behind them. Why they're constructed the way they are." I was quiet for a moment. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. "No," she said. It means you're usually right about people. A pause. You were right about the boy from the lecture. He came to one of my studio sessions. He wanted to be seen with me, not to work. I know, I said. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew before you did. She said it with no bitterness. Just fact. I'm usually aware of when people want the idea of me rather than anything real. Something about the way she said it, quietly, as if she'd given it up as a habit rather than a wound, made my chest do something uncomfortable. Is that why you don't let anyone in? I asked, which was too much probably, and I felt it the moment I said it. But Isolde didn't close off. She considered it, with her usual honesty. Partly. She looked at the lanterns. Mostly it's that most people don't want to do the work of knowing someone. Her hands were in her coat pockets. You do, she said. You just don't realize you're doing it. She looked back at me with that open, careful expression. The one she'd had on the floor of our room. The one that wasn't in any script. Isolde. Juno. Petra materialized from the crowd, flushed and apologetic and holding 3 cups of cider. I'm so sorry, the line was oh. She looked between us. Am I interrupting something? No, I said. Yes, said Isolde, at the exact same moment. Petra's eyes went very round. I should go, Isolde said. Critique prep. She said it to me. Just to me. I'll see you later. She walked away through the festival crowd, lantern light catching in her hair, and Petra appeared at my elbow with the energy of someone who had just witnessed an event she had been predicting for a very long time. So, said Petra. Don't, I said. Juno. I know, I said. I did know. That was the problem. I was in love with Isolde Ashford. The real one, not the 6-line character, not the campus legend, not the idea of her. And she was looking at me like she might be working out something similar. And I was terrified. And also the lanterns were very beautiful. And I was so far off script that the original novel might as well have been a different story entirely. Which I supposed it was. The days after the festival had a quality I can only describe as charged. Not dramatically. Nothing caught fire. No one made speeches. We went to class, came back, studied, made tea, said good morning the right number of times. But there was a new thing in the air of room 214. A thing with weight and warmth, that both of us were precisely and consciously not addressing. I was trying to think clearly. Here is the rational case for saying nothing. I didn't actually know if what I'd seen in her face meant what I thought. I was a transmigrated person in a fictional novel where I had zero narrative authority. I was supposed to be background texture, getting involved in feelings, especially feelings aimed at the second female lead. Seemed like exactly the kind of plot entanglement I had been trying to avoid. Here is the rational case against the rational case. I hadn't been background texture for months. I was already entangled. I was so entangled that I had started planning my morning schedule around the 17 minutes between when she finished her coffee and when she left, because that was when she was most likely to say something quietly funny and look at me sideways to see if I'd caught it. I was empirically already in it. The question was whether I was going to be in it out loud. I was wrestling with this on a gray Thursday afternoon when Isolde came home from her structural engineering class, set her bag down, sat at her desk, and didn't open anything. She just sat there, hands flat on the desk. I watched her for a moment. Bad class? No. Bad day? No. Are you? I've been thinking, she said, about the festival. My pencil stopped. Specifically, she continued to her desk, in the tone of someone who had decided to do a difficult thing, and was going to do it with full commitment. About the moment before your friend arrived. Petra, is supplied unnecessarily. Petra. She turned to face me, which she did with her whole body, the way she did everything, completely, no half measures. I said something. You said several things. You know which one, she said. I did. You do. You just don't realize you're doing it. Juno. And there it was, my name in her voice, all 4 letters, something in her allowing itself to be uncertain. I don't do this. I know. I don't, she stopped. Exhaled. I'm not someone who, I don't generally let things. Isolde, I said gently. You brought me my umbrella. She looked at me. And the crackers, I said. And the cardigan. And the saved seat. I held her gaze, because she deserved the same honesty she gave everyone. I noticed things too. Something in her shifted. A quiet earthquake, just behind the eyes. I don't know what to do with you, she said, which coming from Isolde Ashford, who always knew what to do with everything, was so staggeringly earnest that it punched all the air out of my chest. That makes two of us, I said honestly. The ghost of something moved across her face. That's not reassuring. I know, but I think not knowing might be okay. I turned my chair to face her properly. I've spent this whole semester trying to stay off script, trying not to get involved in anything. And then, I gestured between us vaguely, inadequately. This was not in the script. She looked at the gesture, then at me. You speak about your life as if there's supposed to be a plot. I laughed a little helplessly. You have no idea. Tell me. Some other time, I said, and meant it, because there would be one, a time that wasn't right here when the conversation was tipping towards something real. The short version is, I was trying very hard not to feel like this, and I failed, and I think I should just say that. Say that you failed, she said, and she wasn't mocking it. She was listening. Say that I feel like this. I corrected. About you. Quite a lot. To an extent that I'm not going to describe in detail because I have some self-respect left, but yes. Isolde Ashford, composed, measured, impossible, wonderful Isolde, looked at me for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay. I feel, she said carefully, like she was placing each word precisely, similarly, in a way that is unfamiliar and frankly inconvenient, and I have been trying to solve it like a problem and it resists being solved, which is also your fault. My fault, I said. You keep saying things that revise my estimates, she said. And you buy coffee before I ask. And you laugh at the things I don't say out loud. She looked at me steadily. So yes. Similarly. The room was very quiet. So what do we do? I asked. She considered this with the full architectural seriousness she brought to everything. Something deliberate, she said. Not accidental. We've been doing it accidentally. You want to have a plan? I always want to have a plan. I smiled. I couldn't help it. Okay, I said. Then, dinner on Saturday. Intentionally. Not because we're going the same direction. She held my gaze. Yes, she said. That works. She turned back to her desk and opened her textbook, except that she was very slightly smiling, and I was very slightly smiling, and the room had completely changed in a way that had nothing to do with furniture or schedules or the angle of her lamp. I picked up my pencil and tried to remember what my essay was about. I did not remember for quite some time. There are things I know and things I don't know. I don't know fully what this world is, whether the novel is still happening somewhere, whether Lily Co is falling for the wrong man in chapter 15 right now, whether any of it was real before I got here. I don't know if I'll go back. I've thought about it less and less, and the thinking has been mostly theoretical, the way you think about a place you used to live. This is what I know. I know that Isolde takes her coffee black at 7:45, and will occasionally accept it when I make it first, though she will note if I've done the temperature wrong. I know she laughs at things she doesn't tell you are funny, and if you catch it, she will file you under worth keeping. I know she is devastating at design critiques and a menace at board games, which we discovered after Petra insisted we all play something and watched Isolde win with the strategic composure of a general, and the three of us spent the rest of the evening trying to figure out how. I know that she reaches for my hand when we walk, not always but sometimes, with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone who has decided a thing and is at peace with the decision. I know that she asked me, on a quiet Sunday in December, what I meant when I said my life was supposed to have a script. So I told her. All of it. The whole ridiculous, impossible truth. She listened without interrupting, which is what she does. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then. You said I had 6 lines, she said. In the original version, yes. She considered this. And now? I've lost count, I said. You've significantly overrun your word budget. The almost smile. The real one. The one that reached her eyes. Good. Good. 6 lines is insufficient, she said, with the calm certainty of someone correcting an obvious structural flaw. I have things to say. She does. She absolutely does. And I, who was supposed to give someone directions and disappear into the background of someone else's story, have stopped keeping count of the pages. We're not in that novel anymore. We're in this one. And I have absolutely no idea how it ends, and for the first time in either of my lives, I'm not looking ahead. I'm just here. Thanks for spending time with Flustered Novel. If this story made you laugh, blush, or scream at the characters, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and come back for more chaotic romance stories. See you in the next novel. For everyone who ever loved a character with 6 lines and too much potential, you were right about her.